Hello, wherever you happen to be. I hope you're safe, and if you're not feeling too good, I hope things get better. As they say, things get better in the end, and if it's not better, it's not the end. Anyway, yes, my name is Damien, the tall, friendly atheist dad. As you can tell, I'm from Australia, and where we are right now, it is it is currently 9:51 a.m. So yes, yes, as you can tell, there is a podcast called the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad Podcast. That's because I am a tall, friendly atheist dad. If you go to anchor.fm/TFA dad, or if you go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, or any of the major podcast platforms, you'll find the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad Podcast. This is a series of readings of various books. If you jump onto the YouTube channel, go to youtube.com and search for Tall Friendly Atheist Dad, you will find the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad Podcast YouTube channel, where I read numerous books, both historical and somewhat contemporary. And I read them with and give my own personal take, my own response, all that kind of stuff. So yeah. If you don't like these historical texts, there is Frank Turek's I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. There is also Creflo Dollar's Total Life Prosperity, if you want something a bit more counter apologetics. But anyway, yes, so this is chapter 6 of The People of the Abyss. A book about... so the whole premise of the book is that Jack London is an American journalist who goes undercover into the deep slums of East London, which was rife with poverty and crime and just a general cruelty from the government. So anyway, so this is chapter 6, Frying Pan Alley and a Glimpse of Inferno. So 3, 2, 1. Three of us walked down Mile End Road, and one was a hero. He was a slender lad of 19, so slight and frail, in fact, that, like Fra Lippo Lippi, a puff of wind might double him up and turn him over. He was a burning young socialist, in the first throes of enthusiasm and ripe for martyrdom. As platform speaker or chairman, he had taken an active and dangerous part in the many indoor and outdoor pro-Boer meetings, which have vexed the serenity of merry England these several years back. Little items he had been imparting to me as he walked along. Of being mobbed in parks and on tramcars, of climbing on the platform to lead the forlorn hope, when brother speaker after brother speaker had been dragged down by the angry crowd and cruelly beaten. Of a siege in a church where he and 3 others had taken sanctuary, and where, amid flying missiles and the crashing of stained glass, they had fought off the mob till rescued by platoons of constables. Of pitched and giddy battles and stairways, galleries and balconies. Of smashed windows, collapsed stairways, wrecked lecture halls, and broken heads and bones. And then, with a regretful sigh, he looked at me and said, "How I envy you big, strong men. I'm such a little mite, I can't do much when it comes to fighting." And I, walking head and shoulders above my 2 companions, remembered my own husky West, and also the stalwart men it had been my custom, in turn, to envy there. Also, as I looked at the might of a youth with the heart of a lion, I thought, this is the type that on occasion rears barricades and shows the world that men have not forgotten how to die. So, just what catches me in these couple of paragraphs is that the freedoms and the benefits that we have today, almost every freedom and almost every benefit and every aspect of safety that we have today was because someone risked themselves back then to fight for those rights. Now, I'm no unionist, but I think even everyone today owes a debt of gratitude to the trade unions for things like workplace safety, you know, treating employees fairly, yeah, all this kind of stuff. The 8 hours movement was a big union victory, and I think that is something that we should remember and commemorate, and not forget, because our safety. What's the old saying? The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and I can't help but think that's right. Anyway, back to the book. But up spoke my other companion, a man of 28, who eked out a precarious existence in a sweating den. "I'm an arty man, I am," he announced. "Not like the other chaps at me shop, I ain't. They consider me a fine specimen of manhood. Why, do you know, I weigh 10 stone. I was ashamed to tell him that I weighed 170 pounds, or over 12 stone, so I contented myself with taking his measure. Poor, misshapen little man, his skin an unhealthy colour, body gnarled and twisted out of all decency, contracted chest, shoulders bent prodigiously from long hours of toil, and head hanging heavily forward and out of place. An arty man, he was. How tall are you? 5'2", he answered proudly. And the chaps at the shop? Let me see that shop, I said. The shop was idle just then, and I still desired to see it. Passing Lehman Street, we cut off to the left into Spitalfields, and dived into Frying Pan Alley. A spawn of children cluttered the slimy pavement, for all the world like tadpoles just turned frogs on the bottom of a dry pond. In a narrow doorway, so narrow that perforce we stepped over her, sat a woman with a young babe, nursing at breasts grossly naked and libelling all the sacredness of motherhood. In the black and narrow hall behind her we waded through a mess of young life, and essayed an even narrower and fouler stairway. Up we went, 3 flights, each landing 2 feet by 3 in area, and heaped with filth and refuse. This is another thing, that what we should be thankful for is that, how can I say, the idea that work is something that's supposed to be meaningful, and that we shouldn't sacrifice our health for our livelihoods, but even if we do, that it is well rewarded. So where he goes, poor misshapen little man, his skin an unhealthy colour, body gnarled and twisted out of all decency, contracted chest, and shoulders bent prodigiously from long hours of toil. That guy has sacrificed his body and his long-term health, and for what? For a few bob here and there. It's whereas now, let's say we take something dangerous like mining, for example. Like mining is it is a very risky activity. People die in mines, unfortunately. People do die in mines, and people die doing construction, and people die, in high voltage situations and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is that, well, especially in Western cultures, that people get rewarded for that risk with generous pay and entitlements. So yeah. Anyway, back to the book. There were 7 rooms in this abomination called a house. In 6 of the rooms, 20-odd people, of both sexes and all ages, cooked, ate, slept, and worked. In size, the rooms averaged 8 feet by 8, or possibly 9. The 7th room we entered, it was the den in which 5 men sweated. It was 7 feet wide by 8 long, and the table at which the work was performed took up the major portion of the space. On this table were 5 lasts, and there was barely room for the men to stand to their work, for the rest of the space was heaped with cardboard, leather, bundles of shoe uppers, and a miscellaneous assortment of materials used in attaching the uppers of shoes to their soles. In the adjoining room lived a woman and 6 children. In another vile hole lived a widow, with an only son of 16 who was dying of consumption. The woman hawked sweetmeats on the street, I was told, and more often than not failed to supply her son with the 3 quarts of milk he daily required. Further, this son, weak and dying, did not taste meat oftener than once a week, and the kind and quality of this meat cannot possibly be imagined by people who have never watched human swine eat. So this is actually describing some of the sweatshop conditions. In later chapters, he does actually go into a literal sweatshop, where I'm sure you get the idea. But people in really cramped and unhealthy conditions, expected to work long hours, in physically strenuous conditions with very little regard for their welfare and for not much money as well. And this is kind of at the heart of the fair trade movement, is that you see people in sweatshops in Bangladesh and India and other places in Southeast Asia where they make goods for us in the Western world cheap because So I think it's and this is why we need to this is why I like efforts to check up and down the supply chain to make sure that the people who make the stuff that we buy are being looked after. It's I don't want to say blood money. I think that's a bit a bit strong. But I think we need to, like, the people who make the equipment that make our lives better. I think it's right that their life should also be made better by our purchasing of those things. But then this is a tragic story of a woman who has a 16-year-old son who's dying, and she has to go out onto the streets to sell stuff in order to raise the money to buy the milk that her son requires. That's not the mark of a healthy society. Anyway, back to the book. "The way he coughs is something terrible," volunteered my sweated friend, referring to the dying boy. "We hear him here while we're working, and it's terrible. I say terrible." And what of the coughing and the sweetmeats? I found another menace added to the hostile environment of the children of the slum. My sweated friend, when work was to be had, toiled with 4 other men in his 8x7 room. In the winter, a lamp burned nearly all the day and added its fumes to the overloaded air, which was breathed and breathed and breathed again. In good times, when there was a rush of work, this man told me that he could earn as high as 30 bob a week. 30 shillings, $7.50. But it's only the best of us can do it, he qualified. And then we work 12, 13 and 14 hours a day, just as fast as we can. And you should see us sweat, just running from us. If you could see us, it'd dazzle your eyes. Tacks flying out of mouths like from a machine. Look at my mouth. I looked. The teeth were worn down by the constant friction of the metallic brads. while they were coal black and rotten. I cleaned my teeth, he added, else they'd be worse. After he had told me that the workers had to furnish their own tools, brads, grindery, cardboard, rent, light, and what not, it was plain that his 30 bob was a diminishing quantity. But how long does the rush season last in which you receive this high wage of 30 bob? I asked. 4 months, was the answer. And for the rest of the year, he informed me, they average from half a quid to a quid a week. Which is equivalent to from $2.50 to $5. The present week was half gone, and he had earned 4 bob, or $1. And yet I was given to understand that this is one of the better grades of sweating. So yeah, this is another thing that kind of adds to the injustice of it all. So firstly, the fact that like the man has sacrificed his teeth in order to to make his money, but then this other part where they had to furnish their own tools, brads, grindery, cardboard, rent, and light, and all that. So the people, how can I say, like the people benefiting the most are being as, how can I say, scummy and cynical as possible. It's yeah. So like now, when you're employed, it's up to your employer to provide all the tools and provide the the vehicles, and unless it's explicitly specified, but if you don't supply your own vehicle, you get reimbursed for a vehicle. But here, it's sort of like the boss would it looks like here that the boss would make most of the money, and then he expects all his employees to supply their own stuff, but his all he does is provide the room, and even then they've got to rent that out, which is I think is highly cynical. But anyway, let's see if there's any messages on the no messages, but that is cool. Anyway, so I'll continue from here we go. 3, 2, 1. I looked out of the window, which should have commanded the backyards of the neighbouring buildings, but there was no backyards, or rather, they were covered with one-storey hovels, cowsheds, in which people lived. The roofs of these hovels were covered with deposits of filth, in some places a couple of feet deep. The contributions from the back windows of the second and third stories. I could make out fish and meat bones, garbage, pestilential rags, old boots, broken earthenware, and all the general refuse of a human sty. This is the last year of this trade. They're getting machines to do away with us, said the sweated one mournfully, as we stepped over the woman with the breast grossly naked, and waded anew through the cheap young life. We next visited the municipal dwellings erected by the London City Council on the site of the slums where lived Arthur Morrison's Child of the Jago. While the buildings housed more people than before, it was much healthier. But the dwellings were inhabited by the better class workmen and artisans. The slum people had simply drifted on to crowd other slums, or to form new slums. And now, said the sweated one, the arty man who worked so fast as to dazzle one's eyes, I'll show you one of London's lungs. This is Spitalfield's garden. And he mouthed the word garden with scorn. The shadow of Christ's Church falls across Spitalfield's garden, and in the shadow of Christ's Church, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw a sight. I wish never to see again. Going to pause it there. There is a comment in the... Hello, I'm Rick. I'm Rick. Hey, Rick. Woo! How do you get the joke? Yes, if you go to the YouTube channel, so go to youtube.com and search for the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad podcast, you'll see that there are numerous. I've got playlists where I've got all these books read. Some of them historical. So I've got Christian slaveholders disobedient to Christ. I've got biblical defense of slavery. There's a playlist where I've got we're reading on the Jews and their lies as well. This book here is The People of the Abyss, relatively recent at 1902. But then there's a couple of anti-apologetics books, and I plan to release shortly a series I did on Kent Hovind's PhD thesis. So great question, but yes, if you go to the YouTube channel for the podcast, you'll find more there. Thank you for your question. All right, where was I? The shadow of Christ Church falls across Spittlefield's garden, and in the shadow of Christ Church, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw a sight I never wish to see again. There are no flowers in this garden, which is smaller than my own rose garden at home. Grass only grows here, and it is surrounded by a sharp-spiked iron fencing, as are all the parks of London town, so that homeless men and women may not come in at night and sleep upon it. As we entered the garden, an old woman between 50 and 60 passed us, striding with sturdy intention, if somewhat rickety action, with 2 bulky bundles covered with sacking, slung fore and aft upon her. She was a woman tramp, a houseless soul, too independent to drag her failing carcass through the workhouse door. Like the snail, she carried her home with her. In the 2 sacking-covered bundles were her household goods, her wardrobe, linen, and dear feminine possessions. We went up the narrow gravelled walk. On the benches on either side arrayed a mass of miserable and distorted humanity, the sight of which would have impelled Doré to more diabolical flights of fancy than he ever succeeded in achieving. It was a welter of rags and filth, of all manner of loathsome skin diseases, open sores, bruises, grossness, indecency, leering monstrosities, and bestial faces. A chill, raw wind was blowing, and these creatures huddled there in their rags, sleeping for the most part, or trying to sleep. Here were a dozen women, ranging in age from 20 years to 70. Next, a babe, possibly of 9 months, lying asleep, flat on the hard bench, with neither pillow nor covering, nor with anyone looking after it. Next, 6 men, sleeping bolt upright or leaning against one another in their sleep. In one place, a family group, a child asleep in its sleeping mother's arms, and the husband, or male mate, clumsily mending a dilapidated shoe. On another bench, a woman trimming the frayed strips of her rags with a knife, and another woman, with thread and needle, sewing up rents. Adjoining, a man holding a sleeping woman in his arms. Farther on, a man, his clothing caked with gutter mud, asleep, with the head in the lap of a woman, not more than 25 years old, and also asleep. It was this sleeping that puzzled me. Why were 9 out of 10 of them asleep, or trying to sleep? But it was not till afterwards that I learned. It is a law of the powers that be, that the homeless shall not sleep by night. On the pavement, by the portico of Christ's Church, where the stone pillars rise toward the sky in a stately row, were whole rows of men lying asleep or drowsing, and all too deep sunk in torpor to rouse, or be made curious by our intrusion. A lung of London, I said. Nay, an abscess, a great putrescent sore. Oh, why did you bring me here? Demanded the burning young socialist, his delicate face white with sickness of stolen stomach sickness. Those women there, said our guide, will sell themselves for 3 or 2. or a loaf of stale bread. He said it with a cheerful sneer. But what more he might have said I do not know, for the sick man cried, "For heaven's sake, let us get out of this." Okay, so there ends chapter 6. Frying Pan Alley and a Glimpse of Inferno. So where that chapter ended was, so imagine walking down to your local. So imagine walking into, let's say you walk into your city, and there's a big majestic cathedral there, and in the park of that big majestic cathedral, in the park next to that big majestic cathedral, are all these people who are asleep, who are trying to, who are obviously sick, who obviously need help, who are, struggling to survive. Right next to this big church that's, like ornate and well decorated. But this church also has barriers around it so that people can't sneak in to sleep. And this was the cruelty of London in the 18 and 1900s, or of England, where, it's sort of like, and maybe we're kind of seeing that with England now, where, with the way they respond, with the way they're responding to the COVID pandemic, that it's so like, well, we won't worry so much about the people who die, just as long as we get to herd immunity. And that's but so here so the church, which on the face of it is supposed to be the representation of Christ on earth, has put barriers out so that people can't get to it, and yet right next to the church are people who are people who could use the sanctuary that the sanctuary that the church provides. And I'm no raging socialist, but it's just interesting that the socialists are some of the people who fought for what we have today. Yes, it's interesting. But anyway, so in the next reading, and I don't know when it will be. So if you're listening to this, I can't say when, just because I've got all these books that I'm reading through, and it's I don't have a schedule. But if you keep an eye on the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad podcast YouTube channel, you will whatever I upload next is whatever I upload next. Feel free to leave comments on any videos that you see. Feel free to participate in the chat. Feel free to, if you want to be part of the book reading of the discussion, feel free to let me know, and I'll happily give you my StreamYard link, and we can two people on a show is better than one person on a show. But anyway, wherever you are in the world, whenever you happen to be listening to this, stay safe and look after yourselves. I've been Damien, and I am still Damien, the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad. Look for the podcast on whatever platform you find it on, and have a browse of the YouTube channel while you're at it. Till next time, stay safe. Goodbye.